This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Squarespace, the fastest, easiest, most professional, and user-friendly way to make your very own website, portfolio, blog, or online store. And if you go to squarespace.com and use the offer code THUMBS when you're ready to check out, you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
I'm bummed that we're missing Mario Odyssey by like a week.
That's too bad. But that means the next time you'll have played a lot of it.
Hopefully it means that
if it just came out and we just talked about it, then...
Yeah. I'm very excited about it, though. I've been playing so much Switch. It's good. I like a Nintendo, says Idle Thumbs is Jake. The very first game I talked about in Idle Thumbs was, I think, the Wario platformer on GameCube. I think it was on GameCube.
It wasn't. It was 2008's Wario Land Shake It on the Wii.
We're going to be bummed that they're not the hottest Mario takes included, but that's okay.
Yeah.
They could find out about a month later when when Mario Backlash has already hit, and I'm a huge outlier. It's November 2nd, 2017.
This is Idle Thumbs 313. I am Chris Remo.
I'm Nick Reckon.
I'm Jake Rodkin.
Welcome back to Video Games.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've never left video games, Chris.
That's true. Yeah, accurate enough. How are you guys doing?
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have been playing a lot of Cuphead. That is something that I actually meant to talk about last episode, and we ended up having so many other things that we discussed that we never got to Cuphead.
Oh.
Do you think you were Cuphead's millionth customer?
No, I definitely wasn't.
Okay.
Because that happened, I think, within the last week or so, and I have been playing it
Is knowing your Cuphead purchase number? Cuphead hit 1 million units very fast.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, it's awesome. Like,
yeah,
it's great for that studio.
Do you think knowing, though, your Cuphead purchase number is going to eventually be like knowing your ICQ number or like your Twitter join date or something? Or like, oh, my Cuphead number was 36455, and someone's like, wow, that's only a 5-digit Cuphead purchase number. Holy shit.
Must
have been really like on that Cuphead train.
Why do you? Why is it that you claim Cuphead in particular?
Because it just had Cuphead's just I don't know because it hit 1 million units really fast and it's like a weird indie game, so there could be some like cred for how early you got in on. That's not true. On like multiple E3 keynote featured, first party embellished. That's just the state of indie games, Chris. You know.
If you're
I don't know what I'm talking about at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. If you buy a Call of Duty or something, do you get to hold up your like 10 millionth as like a cool number?
Yeah, man.
We were like, I was there on the it was the Midnight Camper for Call of Duty. Also, my name on Xbox Live is Midnight Camper.
I mean, I tried to pre-order Cuphead and I couldn't. I don't think they had a very.
They were always all full. The cooler people than you clogged up those pre-order pipes.
Yeah. I got like people had all the Blockbuster slips not Blockbuster, Best Buy. Remember when you get the slip?
Yeah, the receipt.
But they like run out of them because they only had so many. Yeah,
in this digital marketplace, Cuphead to get back to its analog roots introduced artificial scarcity. So even with all of those things, it was what fuck. Chris,
this
talk
is
about
the
Cuphead.
most worthless Cuphead.
Hi, new podcast. Chris, what's Cuphead about and how is it?
Cuphead is, as probably most people would know, given how well it is sold. Especially for a game of that scale, Cuphead is a side-scrolling, kind of boss battle-oriented platform / kind of almost bullet hell-ish. I mean, it's a side-scroller boss battle collection, basically. There are levels that are not boss battles, but they are not. I don't think they're even critical path content. You don't think you have to complete them to complete the game. That's what it seems to me. It is a bunch of boss battles, and the notable thing about it, the really, really notable thing about it, is that it is basically 100% hand animated in an incredible kind of style mashup between sort of pre-Disney, I guess, kind of like Fleischman era animated cartoons and the sort of like Disney era lushly illustrated, very smooth animation, technical prowess,
like early multicam, like Snow White through sort of mid-century Disney.
And the effect is that it is easily one of the absolute most overwhelmingly beautiful games I have encountered in a long time. It is, the first time I'd seen lots of screenshots, I'd seen videos of Cuphead because this game was, as Jake said, was promoted heavily by Microsoft as a first-party indie title. So I mean, it was definitely out there a lot. I played the PC version for what that's worth, but with a game like this, it probably looks pretty much identical on any platform. And even having seen a bunch of materials ahead of time, I was not prepared for how much, with like headphones on in front of my screen, how much this thing just knocked my goddamn socks off with how beautiful it is. It is an incredible visual achievement. I would go so far as to say that is the principal value of this game, which sounds like a diss, but it's not that the game isn't fun. It is. It's also fucking impossible. It's really hard. It's shockingly difficult for a game that trades so heavily on its beauty, which is something that is...
That's also true of like Ori and the Blind Forest, a very different aesthetic, but like everyone looked at how beautiful that game was, and then it was brutal.
I would say Ori, gameplay-wise, is still more welcoming than Cuphead. I mean, to be fair, Cuphead does have a... Every time you enter a level in Cuphead, you choose between normal difficulty, which is, like in any other game, would be considered hard or brutal difficulty, or what is called simple mode.
Simple.
I have not played simple because...
You're a gamer.
Because I'm me, and I just can't bring myself to do it. But I maybe would have tried it by now had I not read online that it actually removes some amount of content from the game. I guess one of the ways in which it makes it easier is to simply skip certain things.
That's true. Actually, I did play it once, and what happens is, so if like the boss battles in this game have phases often.
Yeah, they're all always. They're all multi.
Boss phases get removed? Oh, that means you're saying...
I don't know what he's going to say.
The first, in my experience, it's been the first two phases are simple, and the last phase is reserved for normal. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, I see.
That's probably a lot of cool animation that you'd miss out on.
It is. Actually, see, that's a bummer because...
a completely new, drawing is basically.
Yeah.
I mean, like, because there are just new, like, the boss often just like transforms into a completely different thing.
Yes, So, and the level of imaginativeness in terms of how, like, what the different phases are is amazing. Like, the concepts are so weird. Like, one of the great things this draws from that sort of, I guess, 20s and 30s era animation is just how strange and fever dream like the ideas often are.
Right, it would almost feel like an animator, as they're drawing, working through a piece of animation, just as the drawing starts to change, they'll just sort of lean into it and make it go somewhere weird.
And early Disney stuff has that too, and the Snow White is kind of the like turning point into this more naturalistic style. But like, pre-Snow White feature film animation often had this just bizarre frenetic quality that I do think actually thematically works well with, I think against all odds to me, kind of, and obviously that's why I'm not the person who would come up with a game like this, but works really well with the brutal platformer gameplay. It feels like harsh and unforgiving and strange and like alienating almost, except that it is so goddamn beautiful that it doesn't actually feel alienating. It feels just like wonderful and beautiful and like surprising and delightful. It is such a huge incentive to push through how brutally challenging it is. It is it is just a strange combination of things.
That weird menace though that is in those old cartoons is cool that they're using that for like
they lean into
to communicate.
It too.
I'm a thing that is I'm antagonizing you mechanically as well as aesthetically.
I mean, the thing that is genuinely unfortunate about it to some degree is that, I mean, I'm definitely someone who, there are certain kinds of very difficult games that I take to, and there are certain kinds that I don't. And this is one of the ones that I do. Say that again?
Oh, I said interactive when you said that I take to. Sorry.
Oh, my God. Okay. This is the
I said it to myself, and you asked.
Well, I wanted to hear what you said.
No, you didn't.
I only knew that in retrospect. So this is the kind of game that I can get good at, and I am. I mean, I've played through... according to the percentage in my save game, I'm just about halfway through the game. I'm in the middle of the second aisle, I guess, and it is so difficult. It's one of those games where I at least have the experience of going into a boss battle and dying a few times and thinking, this is impossible. I'm never going to do this. And then, 20 tries later, I've aced it, but every time that happens, it's a little bit harder to believe that I'm ever going to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a shame because, most games that are like this, I'm just going to stick with it because I love the mechanics and I just actually want to keep doing it. I like the mechanics in this game, but they're not transcendent. They're not revelatory. It's not like playing Super Meat Boy where I'm like, everything about this is so amazingly perfectly tuned that I'm pushing through it for its own sake. I'm pushing through it because it is so expertly crafted in every element of the kind of gameplay experience.
In that game, you want to get to the next level because it's the next sort of satisfying take on their own mechanics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This game is fun, and I think the mechanics are very good, and they're tight, and that's what's important in a game like this. But honestly, at the end of the day, the real reason I'm pushing through it, and I wouldn't if it were not fun, but the real actual motivating factor genuinely is because I want to see the next phase of the next boss, because they're so beautiful and cool and amazingly rendered that is a huge force that is like drawing me through the game, and I'm kind of concerned that I'm going to get to a certain point where I just can't keep going. And I'm certain that if that's true for me, I mean, there's obviously a lot of people who are better at these games than I am, but realistically there are a lot of people who are not going to be able to get as far as I did in this game, who would be super interested in the visual design. I think that's kind of a bummer.
I bet this is a good game for kids for this reason, though. I bet that
because they will just bash on it forever.
Yeah, I bet that Cuphead actually has that same, like we've talked about, sort of the draw of like the Mega Man series when you're a little kid, and it's just Cuphead is a game that you are encouraged to master in like the old like Nintendo platformer sense, or I guess or bullet hell shoot 'em up sense. But it's also really rewarding, like maximally rewarding, the same way that like playing a Mega Man or playing a shmup, you get to see the new art and the new stage, but in this it's out of control, I guess.
Yeah. And I gather from sort of peripheral vision of social media that there's been some kind of, I guess just as is the case with almost everything that people have opinions about now, there's been some kind of like culture war extension into like arguments about difficulty of Cuphead. I don't really have any idea what the substance of those arguments are about. So if I've said anything that is like offensive to someone on any level because of their position on how Cuphead's difficulty somehow relates to like anything that actually like is part of the world, I'm sorry, but my opinions of it are just what I said, I guess. I do think it's a fantastic game, and I'm so happy that something this beautiful exists in this way, because it's a kind of beauty that is rare because it's incredibly labor intensive to make something like this. I mean, you can just tell how carefully this all is hand animated. And the other amazing thing about it is how seamless it all is. I mean, one of the things I would expect playing a game that is all sprite animated, largely sprite animated like this, is that at least sometimes you'll see the seams between the animations, or there's a frame delay or something. I just have not seen anything that makes it look anything other than completely seamless, and it's absolutely incredible.
I think it's interesting that Cuphead has this aesthetic as a video game, when I don't think that a project of this scale would actually be able to exist anymore as an animated film or an animated short. It's something that is honestly been true about video games for a long time, but especially basically since sort of Xbox 360-ish era, not because of any specific thing that Microsoft or Sony or anyone else did, but I feel like games' ability to lay down an aesthetic that is completely outside of normal popular entertainment, but combine it with a really traditional set of mechanics, really does allow artists in the gaming like sphere to do outrageous, cool visual stuff that you just don't get to do if your work is primarily narrative. Like this would get shunted away as like an art thing, except that instead it since it's basically a bullet hell platform, it can look like this. It's like it's I feel like there's a billion things to unpack inside of that are both good and bad, but it's interesting at least.
Absolutely.
Like the sort of crass, well, the only reason that people are playing it is because you're shooting a billion guys.
Right.
Whereas in the feature film version of this, it would not be literally someone going like over and over. But whatever, that's not the actual experience that your brain has when playing Cuphead, even though that is what the mechanics are.
Right. Well, on that note, though, I did have one thought playing this game, which is, man, it's kind of silly that I have to hold down the shoot button forever because there are times when I don't.
Oh, I had expected it to be twin stick. Interesting.
No, it's not. You fire.
I guess because you have to jump and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is twin stick in that. Well, no, it's not. It's not twin stick. You only use the left stick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you've played it at least, but I guess
for
it's
like
not
minutes.
enough to.
Yeah.
But it does have. I mean, it is weird that my thumb is just pressing a button for essentially 90% of the time I'm playing a game. I mean, there are times where, for very specific reasons, in a specific level, you don't always want to be shooting every second.
Right.
But like, that is very rare. That is not. I mean, typically there's no reason not to simply be firing all the time. And that does feel kind of numbing to me a little bit, but whatever. That's like the most tiny criticism. It doesn't really matter.
Can't believe you don't like Cuphead.
I love Cuphead. I think it's great. I considered streaming it, but I wasn't really sure what the point of that was relative to something like Heat Signature, which, the point of Heat Signature is that you're going to have weird, unique, surprising experiences.
It would probably just be to watch you go, oh, wow, whenever anything cool happened.
Yeah, that's probably true. Hello there. It is Chris here from the future, or I guess more accurately, the present. A present in which I have reached the very final boss of Cuphead, which I have not actually had the nerve to even attempt yet. It's been several days since I reached the final boss, and this is a minor spoiler, I suppose, but when you reach the final boss, you get a choice that turns out to be a choice as to whether you even want to fight the final boss or not. And out of curiosity, I basically said the one that meant no, and so the game just ended. So I didn't fight the final boss. So now I have to go back into the game, and hopefully it will let me actually fight it. But anyway, the reason I'm dropping back into the pod here is because I've played about twice as much Cuphead as I had when we recorded this podcast, because I just played through all the rest of it right up until the last fight. And despite that, my feelings haven't changed that much. I still think it's unbelievably beautiful, and I would say that they maintained the level of visual inventiveness and quality throughout, which is something I was worried about. And then more impressively, I think because the game is so overwhelmingly tilted towards boss battles, I mean, almost all of the levels are boss battles. There are a few, there are some optional exceptions, but because of that, it feels like they really actually did try and think of pretty creative concepts for those battles, especially as the game goes on, to the point that there were actually a couple cases when I legitimately couldn't even figure out what I was supposed to do to beat the boss, because it was so outside of the norm of just standard shoot it until it dies. There weren't a lot of those, but there were a couple, and those were frustrating at times for probably reasons that they're not supposed to be frustrating. But in kind of classic fashion, once I actually figured out what I was supposed to be doing, they got really fun and challenging in a good way. So all in all, my appraisal of Cuphead remains extremely positive, and I'm looking forward to diving into the final boss battle to see what that is and if I will ever complete it. But I definitely got better at it. The second half of the game, I think I certainly played through faster than the first half, simply because I was so much more accustomed to all of the game's systems. So that's that. That's my take on Cuphead. Maybe next episode I'll have one final post-completion update, but that's it for now. And with that, enjoy Nick Brecken talking about Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. You have been playing something that I have not even heard of.
The only reason I know of this game, which is Battlestar Galactica Deadlock,
yeah, I do not know what that is.
Is Rob Zacny. I saw him tweet about this game.
Oh, cool.
And I became aware of it and played it. It's
so it's a strategy.
It's a strategy game, and it's based on the Battlestar Galactica, the show, the modern
the one that
show.
came out like a decade ago or
the
whatever.
Ronald Moore show. It's weird. It's weird to play a game like this that's licensed from a property that has not really continued in 10 years. You know what I mean? It's really odd to play a game that is as faithful to that show as it is.
Like out of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, that's completely out of the zeitgeist. Like, this feels like a game that if it had come out when that series was still on, or even a couple years after, that it would have just been in the sort of Twitterverse, just people losing their minds that it exists, because it does what you would want to do with that property, which is you have your it's a naval sort of top-down strategy game, and they just execute it perfectly in terms of what you would expect from watching that show's visual effects sequences. It just looks like the show. It sounds like the show. The music sounds like the show.
That show also has sort of the big board of ships and fleets moving around as a component of the show.
Yeah, and the show sort of went to great lengths to, draw from sort of actual military and naval concepts and kind of make them more sci-fi-y, but it still felt like, oh, these are big lumbering ships and smaller fighters, and everything kind of feels like, oh, this is analogous to actual military concepts.
What is the flow of this game?
The flow of this game is really interesting. It's why it's notable. It feels so like I talked about a long time ago. I talked about Star Wars Armada, which is a board game. Well, not a board game. It's a tabletop game.
It's like a miniatures game, right?
It's a miniatures game where you have, like miniatures of Star Wars, crafts, and you kind of push them around on the table. And that game is a turn-based game where, this ship moves so far in any given turn, and you can kind of shift things around. Basically, this game is it's the same thing. And actually, so the reason I brought up that Armada is that while I was talking about it, you play this game with two people, and while you're waiting for the one person to kind of shift their ships around, it gets kind of boring because it just takes a long time to do all the calculations and figure out. So when you
play with two people, you mean one-on-one?
It's a one-on-one. That game is a one-on-one thing, and it's a lot of time just kind of, all right, I'm attacking this ship with this ship, and it does 4 damage, and this does 3 damage. Let's roll some dice and find. It just takes forever to get one turnover. And I think I said on the podcast, like, I wish there was a computer version of this game, because you would essentially be doing the exact same thing, but it would just do all the calculations for you instantly. And sometimes you want, to roll dice and be a dork, but like sometimes you just kind of want to get through it. And this game basically,
but that stuff is good when it's like high stakes on specific encounters.
There's a lot of tension, and like
I just have to get through like 20
but like
of these attacks.
A lot of early game kind of.
Just
get your stuff positioned.
This game's interesting. It's the same conceit in that you have two, it's the Cylons and the humans, and you're playing as the humans, and it has a sort of overworld strategic board where there are sort of node-based representations of planets that you kind of have to position your fleets on, and then when one of them, it's kind of like Total War or something, where you have fleets that you're sort of building up using resources, and then you move them around, and then when they come in contact with an enemy fleet, then it triggers a battle, and you go into the battle mode. But within the battle mode, it's basically Star Wars Armada. Like, it's the same kind of tabletop experience, except it's in 3D space. And as you're playing, is it
presentationally like a abstracted military thing, or is it like the cutscenes of or is it like the show with?
It's like Homeworld or something, where you can zoom around and zoom in as far as you want to using the mouse wheel. But what happens is, so it's turn-based, and at the start of a turn, you see kind of like shaded, like transparent versions of your ships that you can click on and drag around the map as far as they could potentially move in a given turn. And then, each ship has various things that it can do, like I can launch fighters on this turn, or I can fire missiles on this turn, or I can increase or decrease my shields or whatever. And then you hit the end turn button, and for like 6 or 7 seconds, that turn sort of plays out in real time, and then it stops again, and you make more decisions. So it's basically simulating that like turn-based thing, but then when you hit the button, it just plays out like a Battlestar Galactica, like a clip from the show, like a 8 minutes or 8 second like VFX sequence of just like ships blowing blowing each other up and everything, and then it just stops again, and then you get to make more decisions. But what's cool about that is that you can actually like, there are moments where the enemy ships just like fire like 30 missiles, and you can see them coming at you, but then they just stop, halfway on the way to your fleet, and then you have all of these decisions you need to make. Like, do I like turn on my flak cannons, and like there's a consequence to that because I have fighters around me, and that will hurt my fighters as well. And like I have shields on the left side of my ship that are really strong, so maybe I should turn my ships to sort of bear the brunt of this attack. Or you have all of these kind of like interesting choices that you have to make on a turn-by-turn basis, but the way that real-time stuff plays out, it's not always. They chose a right amount of time for it to, like
that's
that,
cool.
just enough time to kind of, see an interesting like volley of gunfire, and then you go, oh shit, this means this ship turned left, and I thought it was going to turn right, and now I've got to fucking completely rethink what I was just doing. It's interesting. It's not a perfect game. It doesn't do a lot of things that I would want it to do, and the UI is kind of not great sometimes.
Who made this, did you say?
Black Lab.
Do you know what they've
Studio
done otherwise?
They made, I think, another game that was similar to this, and then did a licensing deal and made this game.
Okay.
Starhammer: The Vanguard Prophecy is what they made. I was not aware of that game at all, but yeah, it's Black Lab Games, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect game. It's not a huge game in scope. There is this, like I said, there's this overworld component where you're building ships and composing fleets, but I think there are like altogether maybe 8 or 9 ship types. I mean, it's actually fairly limited in what it's actually doing. So it's not a game that you're going to spend 50 hours on probably. But what it does pretty well, and it definitely does what you want with a licensed game, which is it puts you in the role of what that person would be on the show, and then it makes you feel like the actual thing is playing out, and it's also just a series of really interesting choices that you have to make in the middle of a real-time battle. Like probably, playing this game makes me realize how stale a game like Total War is for me now at this point, in like playing out real-time battles in those games, because those games have kind of gone from being like slower experiences to now so much more like arcadey, like all about just throwing 10,000 guys on screen at each other, and the choices that you make in the middle of one of those battles are fairly limited, and just more about like it's more about the sort of grandeur and like spectacle of like representing like a massive battle. But this game,
that's actually something that's always been, even in older Total War games, I always had a hard time sort of getting to the point where I understand. Like they always felt so big to me that I could never quite get a handle on them.
Yep. This game's scope lets you kind of drill down into really specific ideas about like what this, just like actual like board game type strategy. Like, and I like that a lot about it. But
that's cool.
It's only $20, I think. So,
and
it's worth checking out if any of that sounded appealing to you.
Deadlock.
Oh, no, it's actually $40. But anyway.
Okay.
Whatever.
Cool.
Now don't buy it. Too expensive.
Rent it.
Yeah, rent it.
Rent it. Jesus.
Anyway.
When did that come out? How long has it been out?
I don't know. It must have come out recently because I saw Rob review it or something. So I guess it's also on coming soon to Xbox One and PS4.
Oh, interesting. I wonder how
that's very interesting.
Translate.
Yeah, because it's there's a lot of fine grained movement in clicking on your ship positions and things. So that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool.
Yep.
Speaking of games I've never heard of before.
Yeah?
Yeah. Jake.
One thing before we move off of Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. If you want to hear a long discussion about it, episode 406 of 3 Moves Ahead on the Idle Thumbs Network is Rob Zacny, Rowan Kaiser, and Luke Plunkett from Kotaku talking about that game for what seems like the entirety of an episode. So
nice.
There you go.
Yep. Anyway, Golf Story?
Yeah, you mentioned this before we started recording, and I do not even know what it is.
Well, it's a game on the Nintendo Switch. I don't know what other platforms it's on or where else it's coming, and I should have known that before we talked about it, but I'm playing it on Switch.
You love your Switch.
I do. I really do.
I'll look it up.
Okay, I mean, before I talk too much about Golf Story, I have to talk about the Switch itself for half a second.
Yeah.
Because I think, Chris, you and I have both talked in the past about how there was an era around when the Nintendo DS came out when I think both of us were sort of falling out of the habit of playing games regularly, and then the DS was a ridiculous shot in the arm. I'm feeling that with the Switch right now in a way that is pretty intense. Like
awesome.
I just pick that thing up and play games on it all the time in a way that I have not for a while. And like I actually go into the stupid eShop and look through and like, oh, what have I heard people talking about on the internet that sounds interesting, and buy it. So that's what I did with Golf Story. It
looks like it's only on Nintendo Switch, by the way.
Okay. It's a Switch game. it seems like the sort of thing that will appear in other places. Like, it doesn't use any of the special hardware from the Switch.
Sure, yeah.
But Golf Story is a top-down, sprite-based, sort of 16-bit era looking golf RPG.
That's what I would have guessed.
From the name.
Based only on the name, that's what I would have basically guessed.
It is that. I mean, it's you play as sort of a young adult who, as in their youth, played golf with their dad and thought maybe you'd become a golf champion, and then your life goes a different route, so you weirdly leave your family behind to go back to this golf course as a young adult, and it's a golf course full of wacky RPG characters, but it has a really refreshingly simple and, like, it has basically the most bare bones golf mechanic of all time, which is like
a power meter.
Shot.
It has basically like the distance of your arc, like, you know, how far you're intending to shoot, what angle you're intending to shoot, and then just a power meter for power, and then when it comes back around, it's
how do you have both distance of shot and also power meter?
It's like
it's their maximum. It's determining the.
You're determining your overall like the scope of the swing at all. Like you can just sort of ratchet it down to be like a shorter
like
one,
Mario
but you
Golf.
can.
Okay.
It's still like there's a little bit of just sort of a feel thing that you can like if you.
Yeah.
If you max out the power meter, it's not going to perfectly hit. That's
right.
There's just sort of a curve you end up
probably
feeling
to
out.
like I guess soften the sort of difficulty curve relative to a game that is only about golf.
Yeah, like in this game, for each shot, your character picks the most appropriate club, and then you sort of have a band of range that you can hit with that club for that shot. And then it's the sort of old PC Link style. Yes, how like the bar fills up one direction, which is how far you're going to hit it, and then when it comes back the other way, there's a little sort of sweet spot at the end, which is do you hook or slice or have a straight shot. It feels a lot like Mario Golf on the NES.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you played this, Nick?
No, just by your description, I was just thinking Mario Golf.
But the aesthetic is closer to like Pokemon or to like an old JRPG. The writing in it is not. It's fine. It's sort of just inoffensive and goofy, and it's not really my thing. But after playing a ton of West of Loathing. Playing this right now is kind of still hitting that same like a similar sweet spot for me that I didn't expect that is a thing that I want. Like I've never
sort of like good natured.
Yeah, it's just a good natured happy place that is a combination of a lot of sort of weird characters and sort of small mini games or weird challenges, all centered around some basic mechanic, which I know is. People will say, well, you're an idiot. That's just what an RPG is. But that's not really what a traditional sort of JRPG style RPG actually is. Like, I've never really liked sort of Square style traditional RPG combat or like Square or Dragon Warrior. Like, I actually hate it. And it's basically turned me off from the entire RPG genre. So playing this game has been really fun. Even just in even the first 40 minutes to be able to sort of experience this like combination of little story bits and little mini games and weird quests, but it's all centered around
the Mario RPG and Mario and Luigi games are also kind of.
They still have that like. I mean, West of Loathing has that traditional turn-based
it's just
one.
so simple that it's.
Yeah, Mario RPG is simple and it's got a timing element that's fun, and this is, I guess, because it's just your golf swing. Sure, it's even farther from that traditional. But it still has that. It's just a simple enough little meaty hook that you can get better at of playing golf. But then there's like, you know, a guy who is just like I'm only playing the beginning things. But there's just like someone who's like, I bet you can't hit that stupid post over there, and then it's like whoop golf swing or like some guy who is. Betting me that he's got a game idea that only rich kids will play, and it's literally just put a bunch of golf balls in the lake. And it's like, fine, great. These are all stupid little introductory things. I know that the game also gets ridiculous, and like I don't think the story is a like save the world type story, which is what you would expect one of these to turn into. But I'm sure, based on just the key art, that there's like a cemetery and skeletons and stuff. That I'm sure I'm gonna play. There's going to be some haunted ghost golf at some point, but just. The thing that it reminds me of is mostly West of Loathing, where it is just this is a very low key, charming experience that's about engaging with a bunch of characters and sort of the breadth of a world through the lens of a couple of very simple mechanics that then also you're leveling up bars and getting a bunch of other weird shit. But like, it's just a charming, nice experience.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah. I will be playing
and
more of it.
And you love your Switch.
I do love my Switch. I'm also going to buy that Mario Rabbids XCOM thing.
Oh, yeah. Weird.
Why not?
Good.
Why not? Oh, maybe I won't, though, because the real Mario is coming out soon.
Oh, yeah, man. You are excited about the new Mario.
I'm excited about that new Mario, but I'll talk about that.
Edge gave it a perfect score I saw on the internet this morning.
Whatever. I'm excited about that new Mario.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that because I expect that to be bad. I think it's probably going to be super good. I don't have a Switch, and I'm going to want to play that game.
Did you see sorry, to talk about the Mario Rabbids game for half a second. Did we talk about the keynote when that game was announced?
No, I don't think so. I don't know anything about this game other than that there is one.
There's a Mario of sort of Rabbids crossover game that seems like it's a turn-based tactics thing. That's
such a strange combination of things.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It was introduced, I think, at E3 this year. It was introduced or in a Nintendo Direct.
If Mario doesn't say threat neutralized in this, then someone's really fucked up.
Oh my god! Well, the person who
in Mario XCOM, like, give me a break.
Yeah.
God, that's true. That is the one time that he would say threat neutralized.
Yeah,
but he probably doesn't.
He probably doesn't.
He probably says pizza tonight, just to like really just
twist the knife.
Just twist the knife. But people were bagging on this game, understandably, because it's Mario X Rabbids. It's if Disney was like, Mickey's hanging out with the minions.
Is
literally
it Mario X Rabbids or is it Mario XCOM Rabbids?
But you know what I mean, though. Sorry, that Mario plus Rabbids thing.
I know what
it
you
is
meant.
literally the gaming equivalent of Mickey Mouse in a Minions movie.
Right.
As far as just like, you know, timeless, our timeless icon versus just like a trash tripping over itself. And you know, people were understandably just harsh to this game.
Yeah.
And I saw a tweet from someone that basically said, I can't remember what the tweet of it said, but it was just a still of the creative director of this Rabbids Mario game.
Yeah.
Like from the crowd shot of the keynote, just like in tears of happiness that he had made a Mario game that Miyamoto on stage at an event said was good.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
And it was just like, whatever shit you're talking about this game, look at this guy and like just eat shit. And like, you know, I mean,
and you go from talking shit to eating it.
Yeah, fuck.
Take that shit that came out of your mouth and put it right back in there and digest it.
It made like my desire to play that game go up tremendously, whether or not I end up actually liking it or not.
Sure.
Just knowing that the person who made it, like, whether or not it was their passion to make a Mario versus Rabbids game, or whether or not it was that it's just their job and they were given that assignment and they made the absolute best thing they could out of it. I don't care. That guy clearly cares a lot about that game.
Yeah.
And like, it will now be hard when I play that game to not play it through the lens of that guy who was so excited and proud of it that he like was crying at his own launch event.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that it's like, that's basically like the opposite of any sort of death of the artist reading of a work.
Well,
but
I think there are two. I mean, I think you can take that multiple ways, right? I mean, I don't actually think that should be taken into account when determining the sort of whether the game is ultimately like a creative success at the end of the day. Like, I don't. That sort of seems unfair to. Because unless you're going to treat literally everything that way, which seems difficult, but by the same token, it also means like in criticism, like just criticize what deserves to be criticized instead of like getting personal and saying that developers deserve to die or something, which is something that I shouldn't have to say, but like happens all the time.
Yes,
like,
you're right. And that is the axis on which that was really potent, is that people were just like, who would do this? You're all idiots. It's just throwaway garbage. This is clearly just someone cashing a check. And it's like, it's obviously not. The amount of work that you have to put in to anything like this is immense.
Yeah.
And you have to care about it if it's otherwise it is just going to be trash. But
yeah,
it's whatever. Anyway.
Yep.
Maybe it's a bad game, but
I mean, who knows? I don't know. Who knows? I don't actually know nothing about it. But
no, what you said was the thing that needs to be said.
It does. I mean, you talking about. I mean, Mario. I mean, at the end of the day, the next Mario game is the thing that actually makes me wish I had a Switch, because I'm sure it's going to be very, very good. It's just hard for me to imagine that it won't be, which is, I don't know, maybe a silly thing to say or think. But
we could talk about it next month. But just watching the sort of core Nintendo Mario team. Increasingly, it's felt to me like from Mario Galaxy to Mario 3D World to Mario Odyssey, it feels like it's been those guys trying to sort of get closer and closer, or sort of try from different angles, figuring out what actually is I don't know how to say this. Not like what is a Mario game exactly, but how do you contextualize the entire history of Mario games and try to distill out of it what the experience is that a core Mario game is in a world where Mario is in every game. Like Mario is in every genre. Mario does everything. So when you say Super Mario X, you know, coming soon, you know, just what the hell does that mean?
Pronounced 10.
Super Mario Run X. Just watching them try to figure out, like, Mario was a 2D character and now he's a 3D character, but like that's the simplest, stupidest one. But like even just the way that Galaxy tried to figure out the like 3D Mario 64 stuff, plus it has the 2D stuff built into it, but like how the camera works, it's very abstract and hard to talk about, I guess. But
yeah,
I'm excited to look at Mario Odyssey because on its face it looks like the fucking most outrageous sort of throw everything against the wall version of Mario, but at the same time I suspect from just the more that has been shown out of it that there is some really secretly very tight core to that game that all the other stuff is sort of ancillary to, or just sort of window dressing on, and I'm excited to find what that actually is.
Yeah.
Or it's just a hot mess, but even if it is, it'll be a hot mess of really fun stuff.
It'll be an interesting one for sure. Yeah. Cool. Should we take a break?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mario plus Rabbids is very XCOM, like very, very XCOM. It's all about cover and flanking shots, says your name here in chat. That is crazy to me to think about.
That is very strange.
How XCOM-y it is. Like, unexpected combinations include Mario plus Rabbids in an XCOM-based tactics game.
Say that again?
It's an unexpected combination of three things.
Strange. Yeah, it's very weird. This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Squarespace.
Cool.
Yeah. Squarespace is the fastest, the easiest, the most professional, user-friendly, and customer-supported way to make your own website, portfolio, blog, or online store.
By the most customer supported, do you mean that like customers support and appreciate them, or that they have good customer support, or both?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I mean both. I think I mean that customers support them because once you try Squarespace, which is free to try, set up your whole website before you're ready to commit to checking out, you will support it because it's so easy. And also, they have 24/7 customer support. So the customers support it, and the customers are supported.
I asked. I wanted to know.
You asked and you wanted to know.
Now I do.
You can prove this out by going to squarespace.com, and like I say, you can get started and make your whole website without putting in a credit card or checking out or doing any of that. You can just make the website, and all the tools are available. And only when you realize, this is the website that I want, this is the professional website that I
have made.
Yeah, then you can use the offer code THUMBS at checkout, and you will get 10% off of your website or domain, your website and your domain. It's a one-stop place.
For online.
One-stop place for online. Squarespace.com with the offer code THUMBS. This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Movement. Yeah, Movement manufactures and sells affordable, stylish watches that can be found at mvmt.com/thumbs, where you will also get 15% off with free shipping and free returns.
Wow, that's really nice.
You could get the exact watch Jake is wearing on his wrist right now, and then bump into him in a mall or theater or something and say, I can't help but notice.
Okay.
We have the same understated but elegant
I see you're a Movement classic white black tan design person. Hopefully one of our two watches contains the microfiche and the other one contains like dirty laundry, and then we accidentally
we run
into each other with the same watch, then they both drop onto the floor, and then we swap them, and then me or the other person gets embroiled in a wacky spy farce.
Right. Yes,
for sure.
Yeah. Hopefully the other person's the real secret agent.
And I'm the
you
goober.
end up in the fun.
Yeah.
You definitely.
And then they just get where I'm like, then where's the other guy? Then that person's life is just like the cutaway of them going, oh, the laundry, and then then they have to like get berated by their boss. But then it cuts back to my story. I don't know why there's laundry in a watch, but that's usually what happens.
Implausible,
Chris. Or like my business documents for like my boring job. It's a nice
both
watch.
microfiche. It's just one of them is microfiche of important government documents or sensitive materials, and the other is microfiche of your boring office documents.
Stuff. In this case, they would mine would just be a nice watch.
That you can get for 15% off by going to MVMT.com. You've been wearing this watch for like 6 months now or something like that.
I have. I like it.
Yeah. It's very nice, clean. They have a range of styles. You have one of the, I would say, more classic, timeless, minimalist
Yeah, I wanted
styles.
a simple one that looked nice that people wouldn't be like, what's that watch? Because then I'd have to talk to them about my watch.
Instead, they can just in their mind say, ooh,
nice watch.
What's that watch? Get 15% off your own nice, elegant, understated, or overstated, I guess, if that's what you want. Watch by going to mvmt.com/thumbs for 15% off and free shipping and free returns.
Ooh. There's a statue of a rabbit on a toilet with an inscription like, this rabbit is making logs. And then the narrator bot character says, I wonder what that means. Well, Mario looks on quizzically.
Jesus.
And then you get into a very positional-based hardcore tactics shooter.
Mm-hmm. As you do.
When I think of video games as a holistic experience, I think maybe it's been best distilled down by Mario versus or plus or X Rabbids.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Jake.
Because we're back?
Because we're back. And because Kane writes, I was talking to someone recently and they revealed they knew absolutely nothing about video games. They'd played Pong and had a vague sort of idea that Mario was a game that involved jumping, but that was it. They were, to all appearances, willing to learn about the medium, but I found myself having trouble working out how to explain it to someone with that level of video game illiteracy. Whatever you tell them, and you don't have unlimited time, that's going to be everything they know about games. That's a big responsibility. If you tell them about Spelunky and Thomas Was Alone, which are both great, they're going to think the medium is just sophisticated platformers. So you want to tell them a little bit about a little bit of everything, but how do you make that into a conversation that concludes before the last proton in the universe evaporates? Anyway, after that, I started thinking about what games you would give to someone engaged and willing to learn, but with no prior knowledge of the medium, to introduce them and get them started. Given your illustrious careers in video games, I figured you'd be the perfect folks to ask. What's the assigned playing section on your Video Games 101 curriculum?
What
Regards,
5 games define you?
First, the way to make that an interesting conversation is talk to an interesting person who's going to ask you good questions in return. If that person literally just doesn't ask you any questions and you just have to explain, that's not an interesting conversation regardless of anything.
Yeah. That also probably means you're overstaying your welcome in that conversation as well. Like if they're not asking you about it, they probably don't give a shit. Just give them this podcast. Just be like, listen to this.
Yeah.
Listen to all 133 episodes of this trash.
133? 313?
Oh my God, 313. I used the right digits.
That's like the Anno games of Idle Thumbs podcast.
My God, 313?
Yeah.
Good Lord. Woof.
Idle Thumbs gets good around season 3, so just plow through. Gets good around, I don't know.
Yeah.
5 games? Good God.
He didn't say 5 games. He didn't say 5 games. That was Nick's joke.
Games.
That's so hard.
It is really difficult. I don't actually know that that's possible to answer. I mean,
what is the specific thing?
The specific question is, what would be the curriculum of, like, the assigned games on your Video Games 101 course? I mean,
that's so tough because also, who's the audience? Are you trying to show someone?
Exactly.
Are you trying to show someone?
Any curriculum has a message.
Because you can have sort of, these are the things that are most emblematic of what is intriguing and sort of aspirational and inspiring and interesting to me about games, or this is what I think can explain the actual entire cultural context of games and sort of their spill-off effects into society, and those are very different.
Or, like, this is how the mechanics of video games have evolved over time. Like, it really depends on what you care about in video games and what you are, or like, these are not games will care about. Well, yeah, I mean, that's... Yeah, you could get into that as well.
You could.
Oh man, it's just, but a general notion of like Video Games 101, that's really tough. I mean, because even in, for instance, I mean, Jake, I know you went to school for film. Nick, you were what, an English major?
Mm-hmm.
I was a music major. So all three of us, I think it's relevant that we all went to school for something that is like a creative art of some kind. And certainly when I was in my first year of the music major, we had classes like Introduction to Music Appreciation, but like there still have to be limits there. It's like even sort of Western art music is a absolutely enormous, like massive body of work that spans centuries and many countries and cultures, and that's still only one like small, choice in like because I took other classes on like the history of Caribbean music, and I took a semester on Chinese music, and like any one of those is just a tiny like peek into those whole cultures of music. And the idea of saying like music 101, I mean, admittedly, music is a lot older than video games, so it's not an entirely fair comparison.
But that's irrelevant. I mean, even electronic entertainment's been around for half a century at this point, and that's more than enough.
It is more than enough. I mean, it is definitely a different scale.
And it also was introduced into a global world that can see all cultures' contributions to that medium instantly. So, like, the breadth of available conversational subjects is obviously smaller, but it's still way more than a 101 class.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely still say that the sheer like volume and pervasiveness of music throughout the history of human society does put it on a different scale. But yes, it is even just the history of video games, which is fairly young relative to many forms of art, is huge.
Relative to the bounds of one hypothetical class. Yes, it's basically still orders of magnitude bigger.
I think you still need a more specific angle on that class to know like what your boundaries are. Yeah.
I think that if I had to come up with an intro to video games curriculum that was in like the same way that like film 20A or whatever it was at UC Santa Cruz, which was basically like, this is the intro class that all film majors have to take, but also a ton of other students will take it to fulfill like an introductory art selective.
Right, yeah.
I think I would be less interested in the overall history of video games and more trying to convey to people what the breadth of the medium of video games is. Like, I think that would be my goal, is like, sure, we will talk about a familiar shooter game and a familiar sports game that probably everyone has played, but we'll try to do an interesting breakdown to make you see those in a slightly different light than you have, whether or not it's talking about like how those games intersect culture, or go the other direction and talk about how they're made, and then also talk about things like Spelunky, or talk about like weird vector arcade games, and talk about Portal or whatever.
Here's a weird thing that none of these other forms of art have to contend with. Which is, does the person have to play those all, and how much of them do they play, and like how do you like with a movie you can at least say this will take you an hour and a half, watch it, and even if you don't like it or understand it, you will have seen it, and you at least have a baseline to discuss it. But like, how the hell do you do that?
That's a thing that a lot of schools
like
have had to solve.
And a sports game, and an adventure game, and a platformer. Like, oh my God.
I've wondered about that, and I'm sure there are people who teach games classes who have very obvious answers to this. But whenever I think about that, whenever I think about a games course, like, part of the thing that was really cool about being a film student, and I'm sure this is way more outrageous if you're at a film school in Los Angeles or New York or some world city that has a film history, is just I was screened movies that I would not be able to see, often on 35 millimeter, often as like an actual historic print. I mean, I'm sure if you're like at USC Film School, that's nuts.
Yeah,
but even at Santa Cruz, it was just like, a professor who knows these things is going to have screenings in just huge theaters. So every week I was watching a ton of movies that I would have never seen. And like game preservation doesn't allow for that easily. And also games aren't meant to be watched by 300 people in a theater.
I was going to say, I don't think this could be I think the answer to this is there would have to be a 12-person class where the professor brings in a copy of blank. And
I don't think it would have to be a 12-person class. You can still do it in a lecture, but then your section with your TA is a place where you play a game. Maybe.
Whatever. There's got to be an hour where you sit down.
I'm sure this is a solved problem, but I'm sure it's a complicated. I mean, I'm sure there's not an optimal solve.
It's probably not a solved problem. It's a problem.
It's a problem people have come up with solutions for, but are probably dissatisfied with. Is my guess. But I'm sure there are people listening to this right now who are either teachers or students in game programs who are like, "You're idiots. Here's exactly what we do."
Write in to questions@adultthumbs.net because I'd be curious to know.
But yeah, how do you? There's like, sure, you can just admit to reality and give your students a copy of an arcade emulator or an Atari 2600 emulator, but like that's not possible for some eras and configurations of games that you would want to show. Like, is your school going to get a site license of Portal? Do you have to buy it at the bookstore if you have your buy a Steam gift code from the like student union? It's
weird.
Yeah.
Well, we're probably not going to get any farther with that.
No.
James writes, "Hi, Thumbs. I started listening to the Idle Thumbs podcast around episode 160, and I've been catching up on old episodes. To keep Idle Thumbs fresh and fun, I have my podcast playlist alternating between archived Idle Thumbs episodes and new episodes from other podcasts. It works really well. Well, I was recently listening to the latest episode of Designer Notes with Soren Johnson, in which he interviews Steve Gaynor. It's a great listen. It's split up into 2 parts. It was directly followed by the Idle Thumbs podcast episode 60, Nasty Good Badass, which begins with Steve saying, 'I fell off of a dinosaur fence.' I paused the podcast in confusion so that I might figure out whether or not Steve indeed said that. I rewound a few times before the podcast continued into Jake replying, and I promptly realized what actually had happened. Just a random story. Thanks for the laughs during my commute." That's really good.
Yeah.
And I read that in part to plug Designer Notes with Soren Johnson, which is another podcast that we host on our podcast network that features long-form conversations with video game developers, and it's really good. The most recent one, at least at the time we're recording this, the most recent one is with Asher Vollmer. I think that's how you say that person's name, who is the designer of Threes and Puzzle Juice. And it's a good listen. It's cool to hear someone talk about designing kind of small-scale, mobile, sort of puzzle, like really elemental kind of puzzle game designs, which are excellent. I mean, those are really well-designed games.
Yeah, we only do Idle Thumbs once a month now, but it's crazy how much actual really interesting game discussion still is on idlethumbs.net between 3 Moves Ahead, Designer Notes, and Idle Weekend.
Yep.
There's hours and hours of this stuff every month. Like,
it's true. Okay, let's see.
And Terminal 7 if you like Netrunner.
That's no video game. Shane writes, "Hey, Thumbs. I would love to hear the Thumbs take on the Marc Laidlaw episode 3 thing that happened a little while back. Cheers." So this is in reference to Marc Laidlaw, who was the he was the
first writer,
sole writer, I believe, of Half-Life, the original Half-Life, and then as over the course of the Half-Life series,
Half-Life
became
2
sort
and
of
through the episodes,
the lead writer as they hired additional writers of basically of all the Half-Life games to date, because they haven't made any since Half-Life 2 Episode 2, and he
10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
it's not fucked. More than 10 years ago now, slightly more.
Yeah, I guess 10 years in a month.
Marc Laidlaw left Valve, I think earlier this year, or was it last year? I don't even remember at this point.
Yeah, I don't know.
He left Valve fairly recently to just sort of, he's had a whole career at Valve at this point, so he seemed to leave in good terms to just pursue other projects. But a month or two ago, he published without fanfare a piece of short fiction on his own personal website that was a very clear...
It was called Epistle 3.
Yeah, it's called Epistle 3, and it was a very shallowly veiled piece of fiction that sort of continues the Half-Life story into the premise of a theoretical Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that swapped all of the character names to sort of opposite gender versions of themselves, and told a sort of, again, as I say, a hypothetical story of what the events of that game would have covered. And it was a really interesting, weird, and unexpected read.
Yeah.
Jake, as the sort of Half-Life 3
as
connoisseur,
the Half-Life nerd it was honestly a very cathartic experience for me to read that, even though, I mean, looking at that and knowing how any creative work, let alone a AAA video game, is made, it's very clear that what Marc Laidlaw put on his website would probably ultimately not have 100% bearing on what would have shipped. Like, that's clearly his version of that game, as remembered at a certain time in development, with presumably his favorite choices out of all of the possibility space they were considering, plus him sitting on it for 10 years and then capitulating the version of it that I imagine has been sort of bubbling in the back of his brain for all that time. So, that's probably not what Episode 3 would have or could have been. And because he decided to write it as a single piece of fiction, he didn't have to contend with what would the gameplay and level design be of all this stuff. Yeah, but just as a person who loves the story of Half-Life and loved the experience of being immersed inside of those games, and always I've just had gnawing questions about it. Just having any version of it that comes out that is vaguely from any one of the people who had their hands that deep into Half-Life, just reading that was just it was a nice experience. It was really it was fun, and it took like 4 minutes, and I went, well, I didn't know that I was ever going to get this or want it, but now that I did, I was just happy to read it.
You did get it, and you did want it.
I did. Some of the things inside of it that were described were insane, and I had a lot of trouble envisioning how they would be a game. And it
was very metaphysical.
There were these just places where reality seemed to just like splinter in ways that I couldn't visualize, and I couldn't tell how much of that was an abstract writerly wish and how much of that was a hint at some really ambitious sort of post-Portal Valve single-player world-rending madness. And also I was like, this is the stuff that would probably make this game impossible to come out, because like it just even the sort of abstract goals of like, you know, the characters sort of get to the Borealis that was that big destroyed ship that was alluded to both in Portal 1 and in Half-Life 2 Episode 2. It was basically alluded to across the orange box. And then when they get to it, it's supposed to have, I guess, Aperture Sciences technology in it or whatever. It was supposed to have portal-related things. But yeah, the descriptions, once they get to that point in the story, are just like reality breaks. And it was fascinating, given that that's always sort of stuff that's scratching at the edges of the Half-Life universe, but I had no way of envisioning how what I read on Marc Laidlaw's blog would be a video game. Yeah. But I didn't care, because the images that it put in my head...
One, it didn't have to be one.
Just like trying to read those words and filter them through my brain's sort of perception of what Half-Life is was like delightful enough on its own that I didn't feel like I needed the game to exist anymore. And I think that's probably why Laidlaw put that up on his blog, was just like, you know,
I think he did it primarily as an exercise for himself, but that might have been why it was public.
I guess I meant for him, it was probably the same reason. Just like, I can put this out there, and then it's out there. It was, you know, who knows what the reaction is like from other former Valve writers and artists. None of them said anything publicly about it, and like internally at Valve.
And I wouldn't have expected them to, given how the way Valve works.
It was clearly a very personal act by that guy. To just publish that.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's someone who he worked at Valve for 20 years, more than 20 years, I think. He probably worked there at least from 95 or 96. I would assume. It was
probably about 20 years then,
and had, in terms of simply the story component of Half-Life, had a very high level of authorship over it. I mean, it's a video game production at a studio, so it's collaborative. Obviously, all parts of it are
sort of the world building and a lot of the tone of the actual narrative elements. Clearly, he at least wrangled them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as far as, you know, relative to any other individual human, he had a decent amount of authorship over those elements of the game. And, you know, it's a strange thing, and it's one of the weird things about working on video games or certain collaborative arts. I would think video games definitely are very, from my experience, video games are very much this way. You know, you work on something in which you feel some high level of authorship because of what you put into it, and then it's like, well, like the minute you leave this company, like it's not yours anymore, period. Like, and there's nothing you can ever do about that, and it's weird. I mean, it's a weird thing, and
it's probably a bit like making a Marvel movie at this point or something. Where
it's more though, like if you drew the Captain America comic and then went and made a movie and then left. Because like Half-Life came from nothing. It came from the minds of the collective of people who were there at the time when that studio was being started. I know, because like working on a Walking Dead video game and creating a bunch of characters for that from nothing, and then they're in multiple sequels. But that's still not. I still imagine the feeling of something from complete scratch. Would be an even more extreme version of that. Man, what was I? Oh, all of this aside, Valve, if you're listening, please make more Half-Life games. Thanks. Signed Half-Life fan 97. Comma Jake Rodkin.
What, named for the year Half-Life was supposed to come out?
Yeah, that's when I signed up for my. That's when I got my screen name on AIM. May it rest in peace. Come January 15th. Oh, right. That's not my AIM screen name, by the way. My AIM screen name is Guybrush
probably someone's AIM screen name though. So message them while you can before AIM goes away forever.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna log back onto AIM for that final 48 hours. I think it goes offline January 15th or December something.
Like
something.
It's coming up.
Whatever.
Next couple
We'll
months.
have to migrate to ICQ.
ICQ's still around because
know.
AOL bought ICQ and then sold it to someone else.
Isn't ICQ like a? Isn't it like a protocol that is more general purpose now or something?
I don't think so. I think that was ICQ had a rollicking life because it was going to get integrated into AIM for a minute, I think, but then AOL sold it off to some other company.
Yeah.
Marc Laidlaw leaving Valve is getting confused constantly in my mind right now because BioWare writer Mike Laidlaw
I was going to mention that.
And man, oh man, do I want those two guys to start something together.
Like a law firm?
Laidlaw and Laidlaw video game story studio.
At law.
Yeah.
God, their name has law in it.
Yeah, I know. They're a law firm for sure.
Laidlaw and Laidlaw, attorneys at law, comma, video game creative direction.
Yeah.
Like, if the Laidlaws do something together,
no relation.
I'll be very happy. Yeah, exactly.
That's the best part.
No relation.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting that those two guys have made huge impacts on sort of the narrative space inside of AAA gaming.
Absolutely.
And they are both, I guess, currently free agents. I don't know.
Yeah. It is. That is a very interesting thing. And
if you're named Laidlaw,
rare among known name writers at who worked for large studios. There aren't that many game writers whose names. I mean, they're not household names among people who just buy like 3 games a year. But if you pay attention to this stuff, those are people you may well have heard of, and there's not that many of those people.
No,
which is it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I can do one more question here, maybe. Billy writes, I'm probably not the only one to have written in about this. You are, Billy. But I think in a recent episode, you missed an important game where time moves on regardless of what you're doing. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Oh, yeah, that's
There's
true.
a relatively short period of time in which there are a bunch of different interactions to manage with characters who are only around certain areas at certain times. I forget the specifics of what happens in the first set of days that gets you the Ocarina song, but once you have that, you are basically Bill Murray in Groundhog Day without the suicide. Thanks for all the podcasts, Billy. Thanks for all the pods, Billy. I never played Majora's Mask because I didn't have an N64.
It was always,
I bounced off Majora's Mask, and always that's one of those games that I'm like, I know this is good. I know this is good, but I can't get into it. And I've meant to go back and play it like 1,000 times, and I've never played it. And
I think that happened to a lot of people. And I mean, not having played it myself, just being aware of the sort of conversation around games, it really feels like, starting maybe a decade after that game came out, it entered a severe critical reappraisal in which now it is regarded, I think, as really ahead of its time and interesting.
Yeah. I got into it and kept being like, I know how a Zelda game is supposed to work, and this doesn't work, and it was so hard for me to get my head around the way the space is laid out and the way the time works relative to, because it's stupid because that's such an early game even in the history of Zelda games, but basically the line outside of Zelda 2, from Zelda 1 to Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo to even Link's Awakening on the Game Boy to Ocarina of Time, it's all kind of just, those are just, you Zelda through them.
Yeah.
And then Majora's Mask was like, you turn into all sorts of weird creatures and the fucking moon smashes things. I was like, one day I'll actually...
Classic second Zelda game on a platform.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I need to play it.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that wraps it up for this episode of Idle Thumbs. If you would like to ask us about some video game thing or send in something you want to say about a video game or respond to anything we've said on this episode or any other, you can do that by sending email to questions@idlethumbs.net. We like getting your reader mail, and it gives us lots to talk about. I don't know, it was good. We got to get good. I thought we got good email this week. I liked it. Anyway, we will be back soon enough with another episode of the Idle Thumbs Ruination online, followed by another episode of the Idle Thumbs Video Game Podcast. So thank you for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Why is chat talking about dog vomit? Whenever I dog vomit, it's just goblin vomit.
Goblin vomit.
Catch him in bed with a goblin.